Hello, everyone. Welcome to the presentation of The Bull, the China Shop, and Change. My name is Isabella Zaczek, and I'm actually coming in from Bergheim, which is close to Cologne. So super excited to spend the next 25 to 30 minutes with you. So let's get right into the presentation. So what I want to achieve today with you is hopefully to get an understanding for the uncomfortable topics and actions around change, and also what it really takes for change to start and foremost stick. And you've seen it in the promo for this event. I truly believe that our uncomfortable truths are the foundation of our permanent evolution, revolution, and also change evolution. And what would make me really, really happy at the end is for you to understand how to change the uncomfortable narrative to benefit the impact of change. Don't rock the boat. Don't burn bridges. Tread carefully and tread lightly. So, what do you think about those phrases? What do those phrases do to you when you hear them? Okay. So for me, it's always like a warning, right? I was like, wait, why? What? And they've always been a trigger point for me. It's almost like, whoa, what have I uncovered? What am I starting? Right? Because when do you hear those sentences, right? Don't rock the boat, right? It's almost like asking you to play small, asking you to not really say or do what you feel in that moment is right. When you talk about or look at change, right, it's about exploring the uncomfortable topics and the actions around change. There are certain steps we must take, we must implement, we must live through to enable, accept, and implement change. Right? And there are also a lot of myths about change, how you should feel, how you should see change unfolding. There really isn't just one path, right? And then what we're going to do again is extract the essence of change and its success, because I do believe there are certain ways that we can all implement, no, not only in business but also in our personal lives. I found this quote when I prepared the presentation, and I've been holding this talk for, I don't know, like the 20th times now. Real change is slow, hard, and imperceptible. I just find it personally funny that I found it from a novel, right? That says notes from a loud woman, but leave that to the side. The essence of it is change is slow and it's hard. So when I thought about how to bring this topic to life, for me, it's always important to dive into the topic, to do research. And for me to understand change, I also looked at change makers, right? Historic change makers. However, I took the phrase or the word instigator. I took that on purpose. Why did I choose it? Because to go through change, to start change, to fight for change, you are starting a process that isn't all that pleasant. The outcome, many times we see it, and then in the end, we're like, oh, great that change happened. But when I looked at change and really the impact of change, I wanted to select these three examples, right? We have, Dr. Martin Luther King, we have Galileo, and we have the women's suffragette movement. So why did I choose those examples, those key figures? For me, it shows that change can be very painful. It puts you on the spot when you start change, when you start a movement. And hopefully we don't see that in the future or in our present day. But with those examples, we also see that change means also to go fully in, and it can also end your life, as we've seen with Dr. Luther King and also with the women's suffragette movement, right? Look at Galileo. I mean, he was up, for being killed, but he then retracted his, statement. But why? Well, he wanted to go on and research and innovate further. It really takes personal sacrifices to bring about change. And further on, another reason why I selected those figures was to show that change is an ongoing loop. It doesn't really end, right? You look at Dr. Martin Luther King, it's civil rights. Galileo, it's the science, right? Everything about science, we see that over and over again, how science is attacked. And then also the women's suffragette movement, women's rights, equality and all of that. It's ongoing and shows that change takes work and it's a daily practice. In October, November, I found this excerpt in Fortune. It's, I think, CEO Daily article. And yes, while it does focus on political reform, and this is by no means a political presentation, for me, it really hits the nail on the head. Because when they talk about, efforts, it's really what I put in bold letters. But progress is slow and uncertain. Why, you may ask? And you can change the phrase there for everything, right? Because politicians, but because companies, because leaders, because, perhaps family and friends from both parties who have benefited from the existing dysfunctional system tend to oppose change. Why is this so key? It helps to understand why change can be painful, why it takes time and patience and determination to bring about change, to have change accepted. So as I said before, I coined the phrase quite some years ago, our uncomfortable truths are the foundation of our revolution. Because how do we expect change, right, to happen, to be fully accepted and understood if we're not willing to rock the boat, right? Lift the rocks and foremost guide humans through that storm. And now we come to one of those myths I mentioned before. I truly believe change must be felt emotionally within an entire organization. Why do I call it a myth? Because what I've experienced in my life, in my career, many times change is put about as, oh, we implement a new system or a new process. It's almost like, yeah, we just want to do it on the surface, but not truly within our entire ecosystem. And that's why I said it must be felt emotionally within an organization. And that means everything. It consists of the good and the bad, the pros and the cons, to fully come to life. So I want you to stay with this graphic for a bit, because it's, for me, the start of bringing you my idea of change. By no means have I invented this, because it actually takes a page out of the book of Dr. Kübler-Ross, who was actually, researching grief. Like, her body of work is all about grief, how grief is experienced, right? And for me, why it's so spot on when it comes to change. And yes, her model has been, taken for various business explanations, right? Like the Kübler-Ross grief model. For me, it so perfectly sums up what we as humans go through when we go through change, or when we experience change, when we are faced with change. It all starts with shock and denial. right? It's like, ooh, don't come into my zone, right? It's my comfort zone, right? It's like, stay away. Why do we have to do it? And then the emotion goes further down into frustration. It's trying to find a scapegoat. It's, feeling, it's a feeling of being forced. It's like, I don't want that change. I'm fine with the current status quo. And yeah, it's also where it starts, where you feel the anger and bitterness for the person who has, started the change, who is talking about change. It's a human nature, right? Like, it's always easier to blame someone than take on accountability. And then you hit rock bottom. You hit depression. It's the lowest of the low. Lack in energy, morale. And yet, and that's why I put it in bold and red, it's the turning point. It's the turning point of letting go. And it's the moment where you, as a change leader, a change evangelist, it's where you find your people, where you show your people that you hold them, that you hold that safe space, and you can bring them out of that valley of depression. It's such a crucial time to also show vulnerability, especially in that situation. And then you see an uptick, right? You see the uptick to experimentation. It's initially starting to feel change. I always like to say it's like trying on that new sweater, right? You're not convinced, it fits, and you might have gone for a color that is normally not your status quo, right? It's not your go-to color, and you're like, let me try it on, right? Let me wear that new sweater and see how it fits. And hopefully from that stage, you go into acceptance, embracing change, and learning how to work in that new changed environment. And you will see there is increased optimism, right? And engagement around the people, around the team, about it, around an ecosystem. And ultimately, right, it's the integration where we want to move to, where change is implemented. However, what I want to point out in this presentation, because it still is very linear, in real life, that's not it, right? Reality shows that, especially between depression and acceptance, you will see highs and lows. You will see a back and forth. You can go from depression to experiment. When things don't work out, that sweater doesn't really, fits well. It's, scratches you, whatnot. You might, resort back to depressions like, oh, I just want to give up. So you will see that, especially between depression, experiment, and acceptance, you will have a back and forth. And it's always important to stay on point, right? To keep the team focused, to keep yourself grounded and focused as a change maker, as a change leader, to guide humans through that storm. And I said at the end there, right? Integration and change isn't just done, right? Or once and done. It's what I said when I showed you those historic instigators. It's a journey, it's an ongoing loop. And it's so crucial, right? When I showed you the phases, to follow up and follow through. How often have we gone through initiatives, various initiatives to make life better? And we've seen that, right? Where when they were presented to us, it sounded like a great idea. However, it's the follow through that is lacking so often to actually bring a process to that final point, right? And like I said before, change comes in small and excruciating steps, right? We mustn't skip any steps. That is another key message. We mustn't skip any steps, because we cannot avoid frustration or depression. We cannot just go from shock and denial to let's experiment. This is again then forcing the issue. It's forcing the change, and it will only be done half-hearted, and it will not even have any chance to succeed. And what is also very important during any change process, to deliver short-term commitments and to celebrate those. to make sure people see that change is happening. And that cannot just be done with setting long-term goals. It's short-term commitments. And it's about monitoring feedback and behavior. And this is what I then call change management. So change happens. Once change is implemented, change management happens. So you're probably asking yourself, hopefully, so how can we actually get change done? Now we know the human emotions, we see how we react to change, and think about a change that you have gone through personally, professionally. What are a couple of tools that I can give you that you can use to help a change process or start a change process? I call it the vitamin C. For me, it's the antidote to failure. And yes, I do like to play with words. What do I mean by that? So now we're seeing like a huge bouquet of words that are coming our way, and I leave that up to you to get into all of them. They all start with a C. It's almost like, I couldn't resist. But for me, those are all the tools that are needed to start a change process, to get understanding for it, acceptance, and then have change happen. So let's look at some of them in more detail. So clarity. Where are we without clarity, right? Clear is kind. I think it's one of the staples, at Anonymous Alcoholics, for example, where clarity is at the key of everything. It's about understanding the vision and the why, right? Why? It's not a justification. Do not, mistake justification for why. The why is to understand a movement, to be part of a movement, to be wanting to be part of a movement. Then conviction. For me, that goes hand in hand. It's putting yourself on the spot. It's showing up. And it's also what I said, like leading through exposure. Connection. Where would we be without connection? It's about listening also to the people that are hesitant, that do not want change. It's speaking the same language, right? And for that, you have to actively listen to the people around you, to everyone who is participating or is part of that change process. And it will help you immensely to communicate. Compassion. That is a hard one. It is about not just empathy, but it's truly compassion to believe in change that will also enable you to face, not only the champions, that's always easy, people that are rooting for you, but foremost the challenges, internally and externally, depending on the change. But there will always be challenges, right? It's about truly believing in what you do to be able to face the people that are against you. Consistency. Another one, you have to be consistent. It's what I said with the short-term commitments. And that over an extended period of time. Do not think that change is quick. It's small steps, excruciating steps, and it can take quite a long time. And as you see in the examples, it'll never be completely finished. Obviously, commitment. When you work through change in an organization, it absolutely needs top support, right from the top. It needs commitment. Otherwise, it will not sustain and it won't stick for good. And then community, right? Community, as we've seen, it's always the foundation to shoulder change, to shoulder new times. And it might just start with one or two. It starts with an I. It should grow into a we for you to shoulder responsibilities, to shoulder the communication and the progression of change. And then I decided to use courage. as the last one. And as you've seen in the presentation before, for me, it sits at the heart, right? At the very heart of change. Because your vision might not be understood at the beginning. Think about all the people that were called freaks for bringing change about. Those three examples I showed you at the beginning are exemplary for what I'm trying to hopefully bring across, because it is uncomfortable. You will be ridiculed, you will be rejected, right? And it feels intimidating, and it sometimes might not even make sense. So courage for me is at the heart of it. What about consequence, which is a huge C for me, right? Because what if people are there that are rejecting change, are perhaps even sabotaging change? It goes back to that compassion and courage piece. Everyone is going through change all the time. Leading means change. As a leader, change is inevitable. And what I said before, change needs a champion, especially when you're perhaps not on at the top. It's you need a champion. You need allies. You need someone at your side. And foremost, it's not just being about, all Pollyanna and going in and naive that, change will ultimately be accepted. It's very important that right at the beginning, you're very, very clear about boundaries, because you need to understand where challengers, stop and sabotage starts. And then it's also about compassion to call it out, the courage to call it out, because you will face that. As you hopefully remember the quote I gave you on political reform, there will always be people resisting change because they benefited for it. At one point, leave them be. You might not be able to convince them. Think about the greater good. So, as we are at the end of this presentation, it's just summing it up, right? What change is. What change is for me. Change is uncertain and it overwhelms. It overwhelms everyone. It overwhelms the change maker as well as the participant that hopefully will bring, their own change about. Again, excruciating in small steps. It's not easy, and it will not be done in a short amount of time. And yes, it does come at a cost. It comes at a personal cost when you truly believe in change to need, to happen, with change to be done. And as I said before, change is never complete. You can complete subsets and you can complete those little steps. But to keep change alive, or to keep a changed environment alive, it takes daily practice. And yes, change is a mindset. And you see it yourself, right? That's why I'm saying it's personally, it's professionally, it changes you. And change always starts with a me and turns into a we. I truly believe in that. And then, yeah, what I said before with the mindset, change is a stretch and growth, personal and professional. And that is, again, when you allow it, when you allow change to happen, you will see that it does change you over time. So with that, I want to also leave with a quote that I absolutely adore from Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So with that, if you want to continue the change, and I'm going to jump right into the Q&A, contact me on LinkedIn, Isabella Zaczek. If you want to, find me with The Bull, The China Shop, and I podcast on, Apple and Spotify and everywhere else. And let's continue the discussion and change. So thanks a lot. Just gonna come back to the screen. So I'm gonna look into the chat. Okay, I'm gonna check a couple of Q&As. Adopt, adapt, or perish. Very interesting. Yeah, love that. Yes, not in our hands. More importantly, as the new change is AI now. Embrace. Yes, I truly believe, because if you just say no to everything, right? I'm not saying allow everything. Again, boundaries, what I said. So important to know personal and professional boundaries. And yet, if you do not open up to change, because the only constant is change, you'll be left behind and you will not have a seat at the table to hopefully set up rules or, ethical guidance and all of that. And let me just change. Has the curve contracted time? Is the current age as humans evolving, living with so much but then isn't that a constant as well? Constant uncertainty that we are faced. But my personal belief is, because we like most of us, and I think it's human nature to a degree, that we want it boxed up. We create our own tower of fear, because isn't just everything uncertain? I mean, yes, you can live a life that is yours, and you don't need to step out. Not everyone is a change maker, right? And that is perfectly fine. I love to lead, and yet at times I also like to follow. So, but isn't it easier to be okay with uncertainty and then have that mindset? Subtle changes over time or massive changes abruptly. Wow. I will say I'm an instigator. People that have come to know me over the years, I'm a bridge burner. I would always say, however, I'm on the side of the angels, but I think we all like to say that about us. But I like massive change and abruptly. I would believe that, however, I'm not running away. I mean, not getting too personal, but I've seen the dark, and that has made me stronger. So I think if we keep it in just subtle changes over time, we also see that people become tired of change, because I also believe we have abused the sentence to a degree. It's not always change. We need to really define what is evolution, what is growth, what is evolution, what is a natural next step, and then what is change. Because for me there is a distinction, right? But we have used it in companies and everywhere, just so often. Change, change, change. And you're like, oh my goodness, stop with the change already. And what I said as well is, like, we haven't followed through with many. We have left abruptly to not complete it, at least to what we told people. So I'm an instigator, and I like change a lot. So again, find me. Let's continue the conversation. Thanks so much for Dasa to allowing me to talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart. And yes, I've gone through quite some changes, and in hindsight, I wish I would have managed some of them a bit better. And I think that is why, yeah, that is why I'm so passionate about it. Because especially in the era we are now, we need change makers. We need courage and compassion. And I believe you can take businesses to the next level, you can be profitable, and you can be human. And that would be my message to the end, because we can achieve greatness as a group, as a community. So for what it's worth, enjoy the day at DASA. Thanks so much, everyone. And looking forward to connecting with you outside of everything. Thanks so much.